Welcome to Source Explained, where reliable sources become clear explanations. Every video breaks down complex ideas with visuals you'll actually understand. So let's begin.
All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most mind-bending questions out there right now. As AI gets smarter and smarter, we're kind of forced to ask, is anyone actually home inside the machine? And look, this isn't some far-off sci-fi thing anymore, right? We've all seen what these large language models, these LLMs, can do. They can hold conversations that are just startlingly human. So we have to face this question that used to be just for philosophers. If a machine talks like us, does that mean it actually thinks like us? Does it feel? Does it understand? Okay, but here's where it gets really weird. If you ask an LLM about this, you get these bizarre, contradictory answers. Take this one from ChatGPT. It says, I understand, but then in the very same breath, it'll say it lacks genuine comprehension. It's like it's perfectly faking it while telling you it's faking it. And that paradox, that's what this whole debate is about. So how do we even begin to untangle this mess? Well, we need some kind of yardstick, right? A way to measure this. And for the last, 70 plus years, the most famous one has been a really simple but powerful idea called the imitation game. You've probably heard of it. It's the classic Turing test. The whole setup is super simple. You've got a human judge chatting through text with two hidden players. One is a person, the other is a machine. And if the judge can't figure out who's who, boom, the machine passes. For Alan Turing, the guy who came up with it, if it acts intelligent, that's good enough. We should call it intelligent. So the idea is pretty straightforward. If it talks the talk, should we just assume it can think the thought? I mean, if you can't tell the difference between its output and a human's, on what basis can you say it's not intelligent? It's a really compelling point, but it didn't take long for a huge challenge to pop up. Yeah, this idea of if it acts smart, it is smart, got a serious reality check. Back in 1980, a philosopher named John Searle came up with a thought experiment that was basically designed to blow a massive hole in the whole Turing test idea. He called it the Chinese room. Okay, to really get Searle's point, you have to understand this one key difference: syntax versus semantics. Think of syntax as just the rules of grammar. It's about shuffling symbols around correctly. But semantics, that's the meaning behind those symbols. It's about actually understanding what you're talking about. A computer can be a total pro at syntax, but Searle's big question was, does it have any clue about the semantics? So here's how the thought experiment goes. Picture this. You've got a guy in a locked room. He doesn't speak a word of Chinese. Not one. Now people outside are slipping pieces of paper under the door with questions written in Chinese characters. Inside, the man has this enormous rule book, all in English, and this book tells him, if you see this squiggly line, send back that squiggly line. He's not translating, he's not understanding, he's just matching symbols. But to anyone on the outside, it looks like the room is having a perfectly fluent conversation in Chinese. And this is where Searle drops the bomb. He asks, so who in this scenario actually understands Chinese? The man doesn't. He's just following instructions. The rule book? Come on, it's just paper. The room itself? Of course not. Searle's point is that you can have a perfect simulation of understanding, a system that passes the Turing test with flying colors, without any real understanding happening anywhere. It's all syntax and zero semantics. Okay, so Searle's argument is it's a huge philosophical gut punch. But what happens if we step away from the philosophy for a second and put on a scientist's hat? How would someone in, say, cognitive science tackle this problem? And this really gets to the heart of how science works. Scientists start with something they can see and measure, in this case, behavior. That's the thing they need to explain. Then, to explain it, they come up with a theory, an idea about some invisible process causing it. It's like gravity, right? You can't see gravity. But we came up with the theory of gravity because it's the best explanation for why apples fall from trees. In the same way, consciousness is a theory. It's this powerful concept we use to explain really, really complex behavior. So this gives us a much more sophisticated way to think about it than just the simple Turing test. It's something called the behavioral inference principle. And the idea is we shouldn't just be asking, can an AI trick us into thinking it's human? The real question is this: Does the system's behavior become so complex, so subtle, so rich that the best possible scientific explanation we can come up with is that it has some kind of internal, subjective experience, that the best theory is consciousness? And as researcher Charlie Wu points out, this is exactly what we do with other people every single day. You can't see my consciousness, I can't see yours. We just observe each other's super complex behavior and we infer that there's someone home. It's the only explanation that makes sense. So the million-dollar question becomes, what would it take for an AI's behavior to be so compelling that we have no choice but to make that same leap of faith? But hold on, there's another huge piece to this puzzle we haven't touched yet. Think about it. Every single conscious thing we know of, every human, every dog, every octopus, is biological. It's all made of, gooey, messy biological stuff. Neurons, chemicals, cells. So, does the actual stuff you're made of matter? This brings us to a view called biological naturalism. And the core idea is that maybe, just maybe, consciousness isn't like a piece of software that you can run on any computer. Maybe it's something that can only emerge from the specific, squishy, chemical wetware that is our brain. Maybe silicon just can't do it. Maybe you need cells. And this really sets up the two big opposing camps in this debate. On one side, you have the computational view. They say consciousness is all about the pattern, the information processing. If you copy that pattern perfectly, it doesn't matter if it's running on a brain or a supercomputer, you've copied the mind. But on the other side, the biological view says, nope, the hardware is everything. The neurons, the chemicals, that stuff is absolutely essential. So what's so special about biology anyway? Well, people who hold this viewpoint to a few things. For one, our brains aren't digital, they're analog. It's a continuous flow, not just ones and zeros. They also seem to operate right on the edge of chaos, this sweet spot that allows for all kinds of creativity and complex patterns to just emerge. And here's a big one. Maybe consciousness isn't the result of the brain's computation. Maybe it's the way the brain computes, the process itself. So we've looked at this through a few different lenses, right? The imitation game, the Chinese room, the scientist's view, the biologist's view. And what we're left with is this giant unanswered question. Because it turns out, the answer you get, it completely depends on which lens you're looking through. This decision tree here does a great job of summing all this up. What it's showing us is that there's no one-size-fits-all test for consciousness. It really depends on what you're looking at. If you had a system where you could see every single calculation, well, you could test it directly. But for total black boxes, like an LLM, or heck, like another person's brain, you're forced to rely on these other ideas, like inferring from their behavior, or checking if they're built like you are. So let's bring it all back to the original question, is an LLM conscious? Well, let's run it through our lenses. Through the simple Turing test, maybe. They're getting pretty good at imitation. Through the Chinese room lens, that's a hard no. It's all symbol shuffling, no meaning. Through the scientist's behavioral inference lens, it's an open question. The jury's still out. And finally, through the biological lens, it's a big probably not, unless it turns out our gooey brains aren't so special after all. And that's why I want to leave you with one last really challenging question. Let's forget about today's AI for a second. I want you to imagine a machine, maybe 50 years from now, that is completely, totally indistinguishable from a person. It can tell jokes, it can feel sad, it can create art, it can be afraid of things. If you met it, you'd have no idea it was an AI. At that point, on what basis, scientifically, philosophically, even morally, could you possibly deny that there's someone home inside?
Okay then, goodbye everyone. Hope you liked the video.